The records show that Bibb County was among the top 20 jurisdictions in the United States with the most non-extradition warrants. That puts them on a list with major departments like Philadelphia and Los Angeles. Bibb County had almost 1,600 felony warrants in the system in 2013. 93% of them were classified as no extradition. That includes 5 of the 11 warrants for violent crimes and 10 of the 18 warrants for sex crimes. Chief Deputy Russell Nelson says most offenders stay within Georgia, and for those who leave, Nelson says extradition can be expensive. Last year, Bibb County spent more than $7,000 bringing fugitives back to Macon from other parts of Georgia and from out of state. Recently, the department has used a less expensive method to bring suspects back, a transport system, rather than paying for it themselves.
Buying tickets, airline tickets at the last minute, they're more expensive. That's nothing you can plan for several months in advance. So buying tickets within 10 days when you need to fly, it can be very costly, and you have to send 2 people.
The transport service generally costs about half as much as sending 2 officers to bring back a suspect. District Attorney David Cook says cost really isn't a factor in pursuing severe felonies. He says felons can be brought back to Bibb when they're found out of state, even if the warrant doesn't state that.
I was alarmed, I was concerned, and so I immediately checked with both my chief assistant and with the sheriff. And like I said, both of them said, from what they know, we've extradited every single violent felon that's been in there, and almost every felon of any kind.
But through an open records request, I found one case in Crawford County where a rape and kidnapping suspect wasn't brought back to central Georgia. The alleged rape happened in 2009. In 2010, the suspect, Jason Ware, tried to buy a firearm in West Virginia. During a background check, the FBI learned about the outstanding arrest warrant from Crawford, and they sent his address to the Crawford County Sheriff. They were also notified in 2011 of a traffic stop involving Ware, but Ware was never brought back because the warrant was non-extradition. Crawford County's incident report says Ware even sent them a letter asking them to drop the charges since he no longer lives in the state. After asking Crawford County some questions about the case, they decided they want to bring him back after all. Samantha Hines of the Warrant Division said, quote, "Since it has been found that this person may be in another state, we'll be contacting our district attorney's office to get approval for extradition." I also asked Cook about that case. He says he does want to extradite him back to Crawford County, and he says he'll begin working with Sheriff Lewis Walker on that as soon as tomorrow. Frank, Portia. Yeah, as part of our investigation into no extradition warrants, we told you about the case of a man accused of rape and kidnapping in Crawford County in 2009. He was found the next year living in West Virginia. First, after a background check, the FBI told Crawford County that the man had tried to buy a gun there. Then Crawford was notified that he was picked up in a traffic stop. Finally, he wrote to the Crawford sheriff asking him to drop the rape case because he no longer lived in the state. But he was never returned to Georgia to face the charge. That's because the Crawford County Sheriff's Department listed his warrant as Georgia pickup only because they felt he wasn't likely to leave the state. After our open records request brought the case to their attention, I spoke with Sheriff Lewis Walker, who tells me his department is planning on making some changes.
We were just thankful that we was able to look at this case, and now it gives us a different perspective of how we're going to go for future with dealing with warrants in Crawford County. It did kind of bring an eye-opening to us that now, you know, we'll take a little bit different measure with this. If we get something serious now, my people know that we will immediately get with the district attorney's office and go over the case and let them advise us what steps we need to go. If it's something that we will need to put that we will extradite, you know, beyond Georgia, we will do that.
After our story aired, District Attorney David Cook said he'd look into the case and seek extradition for the suspect. But after consulting with investigators, he found something else. Turns out the alleged victim also filed an allegation in Peach County and then later asked them to drop the charges. But that was never passed along to Crawford County, so the warrant was outstanding for 4 years.
She was surprised that it was still out there. And based on some of the contact that I've seen, just in looking at this case since it came to my attention yesterday, this really should have been handled back in 2011.
Cook says his office is still working to resolve what he says is a large backlog of cases. They resolved 22% more cases last year than the year before. Now, as for the Crawford County rape case, Cook says that will be dismissed.
All right, thank you so much, Tom.
Frank, this is the incident report obtained from the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office. It says that 67-year-old Billy Milner was tased by Deputy Mike Thomas. Now, this isn't the first time Pulaski used a taser this year, but officials tell me they don't know exactly how many times they've used the device. Chief Deputy Jason Fremont estimates it's the 4th time this year. Tim Fowle says he often sees squad cars headed to his neighbor's house in Hawkinsville.
The police has been out there 8 to 10 times.
His neighbor, 67-year-old Billy Milner, lives on property owned by his family. Milner says they've been wanting him to move out, and that's led to family arguments and police calls. But on July 22nd, one of those calls ended with this. Milner being tased, all caught on video by his friend next door, Tim Fowle.
Well, at first, when I heard the pop, I thought he was shot. I couldn't believe it.
That's from the stun gun.
Yeah. I got hit with two things right there.
Milner says he was tased from behind while walking away from a deputy. The deputy says Milner wasn't cooperating when told he was going to jail.
The deputy didn't know if he was going after a gun or a knife. The deputy told him to stop, advised him he was under arrest, and tased him when he resisted.
Police charged Milner with battery, saying he hit his brother's girlfriend while trying to get his dog back from her trailer. Milner says he wasn't told of the charge until he got to jail.
He didn't tell me I was under arrest or nothing, right? He didn't read my rights, and he didn't tell me to turn around and cuff up or nothing. And I started walking back to the trailer, right? Not running nothing, and that's when he shot me with the stun gun.
Milner does have a criminal record. The Florida Department of Corrections website says he spent 20 years in prison on several charges, including sexual battery. He must now wear an ankle bracelet as a registered sex offender. But he says being tased was a painful first.
Yeah. I felt I was like that, and I really out of my mind a little bit when he stung me, because I ain't never been hit with a laser gun.
An incident report obtained through Georgia's open records law shows Milner was tased 3 times before he would cooperate with the deputy. Now, according to the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office rules about the use of tasers, any kind of resistance to an officer, even if it's just verbally saying, "I'm not going to jail," is enough to allow the use of a taser. It's why, even though the video shows Milner with his back to the officer and walking away, he was able to be tased. Chief Deputy Fremont says tasing Milner was a safer option than trying to physically restrain him, and says Milner's age, 67, is not a barrier to being tased.
In the scenario that took place out there on that day, the way the deputy handled it was proper.
But the man behind the camera, also a former cop, says things could have been handled better.
They're supposed to be public safety officers. They're supposed to serve and protect, and it didn't seem like they were doing either.
Now, Chief Deputy Fremont did admit to me that he thinks the department should keep better records of tasing. He says officers do have to mention using a taser in the narrative of their incident reports, but there's no box to check for use of force, and that makes it difficult for the department to easily find all incidents when a taser was used. Now, he says moving forward, officers will be able to and required to log their use of force. That way, investigators can easily search for specific incidents where an officer needed to use a weapon, whether it be a gun or a taser. Frank? Macon Police Internal Affairs investigators are studying these photos that were posted late last year to a woman's Instagram account. A viewer tipped us off to the pictures. One appears to show Sergeant Jeremy Malone on his knees pretending to be handcuffed while the woman poses with a nightstick. In another, Malone has the woman in cuffs with her face down on the trunk of a Macon police car. A third shows the woman wearing Malone's police jacket captioned, "Hanging out at MPD at 5 a.m." All the pictures show Macon Police insignia. We asked Macon Police spokeswoman J.B. Godet about them and shared copies. She said Macon Police were unaware of the pictures. Godet says Malone has now been reassigned from Precinct 4 to a desk job while they investigate. The photos were posted to Instagram around 6 months ago by a woman with the screen name Jessica4593. Godet says it's impossible to babysit officers' personal social media accounts or their friends, but she says when people notify them of possible problems, Macon Police take them seriously. She says the department has a, quote, reasonable and sound social media policy like many other employers. While it says employees have the right to use personal social media sites, it says police are, quote, public servants who are held to a higher standard than the general public with regard to standards of conduct and ethics. It prohibits posting Macon Police logos, uniforms, badges, or other department symbols. Bibb County Sheriff David Davis says his office is working on a similar policy.
With photographs like this, or photographs that are unprofessional or certainly inappropriate, people will look at that, and by implication, you're speaking for the office. And so those types of behaviors certainly cannot be tolerated.
The general public could view the woman's Instagram account and the photos on it on Tuesday, but she apparently changed it to private by Wednesday morning. Malone's been on the force for 8 years. We requested his Macon Police disciplinary record. It shows 7 reprimands, mostly for missing court dates, and 1 2-day suspension in 2011 for using excessive force, but no complaints about social media. Tom George, 13 WMAZ, Eyewitness News. Macon police officer Alfred McCoy has eyes in the back of his head.
This here will be the rear license plate reader, which will get the vehicles that are going away from me. And this one here will get the vehicles that's on the left side of me, whether they're passing me or I'm passing them.
It's one of 5 $21,000 units around the MPD he's had on his car the past few months. Before, to know if a car was stolen if it wasn't doing anything else wrong,
I would never know.
Now the system instantly scans for stolen cars, people with warrants, and expired tags.
Anything involving the vehicle where maybe a child is taken or hit and run stolen cars, I can automatically go in and insert that plate into my computer. And if that car passes by me, it will let me know.
So we decided I stole our news truck. All right, so we're about to test this out. I'm going to drive by Officer McCoy in this car, which has now been reported stolen in the system by WMAZ. How long did that take?
That took less than a second. Once you went by, it sends out the alert. So the person that's driving that 13 WMAZ vehicle that's stolen is about to get stopped.
But while it's good for catching the bad guys, it's also scanning everyone else.
They will scan as many tags that goes by me. There's no limit.
The MPD doesn't know how long people's information is stored, and that has Mercer Law professor Dave Odell concerned.
It doesn't seem to me that searching involves canvassing and blanketing all kinds of data. That's not a search. That's a huge governmental overlay. I think it's not constitutional.
But it seems for now, the extra set of eyes on this car will be watching. In Macon, Tom George, 13 WMAZ Eyewitness News. Earl Collins didn't know the ER in Montezuma was closed until he needed it last month.
Because I couldn't urinate, so I had to get help,
Collins lives in rural Ideal in Macon County. At the nearest ER in Montezuma, all that's left are closed doors and caution tape. Instead, he had to drive 30 miles south to Americus to get help for a bladder infection.
Because I was just around my bladder, I was going to burst if I had to.
It's been the story in Montezuma since Flint River closed the ER in early September. EMS Director Joe Weaver says they've had to staff another ambulance just to handle longer trips to either Americus or Perry.
Well, it does put people at more risk. Instead of being able to, how would you say, a 10-minute transport time, you're looking at 30 to 35 minutes.
And long trips also mean long returns.
Because they said they have 2 trucks at that time, and they both was out. And they didn't have no way of getting to us, so they told us to take them on in the car.
EMS records show the number of calls taken by E911 jumped by almost 50%, from 127 in September when the hospital closed to 189 in December. Without an ER, even illnesses like asthma can be more difficult to treat, as pediatricians don't always have the tools an ER does.
It's a case of waiting for an ambulance to come to transport, and then to actually, we don't have any of the medications, the IV medications that you would give in those kind of scenarios.
It's also caused a dent in the county's finances. Before the hospital closed, EMS already got a new ambulance, but now because of the higher call volume, the county has had to spend more money gassing them up and making sure there's enough medical supplies in here to handle the extra traffic. Since the closing, Macon County added around $400,000 in EMS expenses, almost a tenth of the small county's budget.
It is a tremendous deal. I mean, our economic base here is very, it's stable. However, we're in a rural area, and we don't get that type of growth in a year.
Local officials say they weren't given much notice before the ER shut its doors. In August, the hospital sent a letter to employees saying the closure would, quote, optimize reimbursements for the company.
I think they knew what the impact was, but basically, as a business, I guess they're operating, based on the bottom line.
So for now, people in Macon County have fewer options.
I think it would be great if the legislators could go into rural areas and build these hospitals or fund them some way or another, because these people out here don't have health care as far as hospital-wise.
So we need somebody to get on or do something around here, make things a little better for us like it was last year.
Meanwhile, EMS says they'll continue to do what they've always done.
We will send a truck, we will take care of you, and get you to the hospital as quick as we can.
In Montezuma, Tom George, 13 WMAZ Eyewitness News.